by the kingdom's now incarcerated spokesman Dewar, and the king's own admission in the past, he has used the information of many and put it all together to paint the picture as Dewar was so confident to state. However, that picture is not correct. The problem is, he has used factual based information, then skewed and changed that information into a false created narrative with a few large dragons from Hogwarts Academy of silly magic to suit an agenda and added it in. These guys have been around allegedly for a maximum of 10 years, if you can believe that. They should by now have a complete comprehension of what has transpired. However, they have not gone back in our empire's histories to fully comprehend the size of the painting. We here at Sovereign Australian have always kept the name or names of our authors and resources pool private to allow the information to speak for itself. We provide the direct links to the authors when required and never wish to claim personal credit for such information as we believe it belongs to the people, not to mention sourced from many historical accounts like Parliament public records and statistics, encyclopedias, Bibles, great authors and philosophers over the many ages of history. Everyone is entitled to an opinion as well as one's own perspective of events. However, modifications of that history for agenda make anyone as bad as those who have already changed it to deceive. Good or bad, history must be preserved or mankind is doomed to repeat it. Okay, so let's continue. Now for the record. Our AIF Anzacs were founded on the 15th of August 1914. What flag was flying then? Well, we know the 1908 red and blue ensign versions were made official. However, our diggers would have had many personal belongings and flags, dependent on what they had purchased and when they purchased them. Of course, one could not possibly know what our diggers owned at the time. However, if one looks deeper, there's another twist to the Red Ensign flag collection right around the time of the AIF formation. First Australian Imperial Force in World War I. The Australian government established the Australian Imperial Force, AIF, in August 1914 and immediately began recruiting men to serve the British Empire in the war. The men of the AIF served in the Middle East and on the Western Front during the war. Before the war, Australia's regular army was a young, evolving force when war broke out. It had been formed when the separate defence forces of 6 colonial states were joined with the Federation of Australia in 1901 under the awaiting approval of the unofficial pending Red Ensign and Blue Ensign flags. At this point, the only official flag was that of the Union Jack. It would be a further 2 years or so before our Commonwealth had our own official flag of the Commonwealth of Australia. Before the war, the Army introduced 2 major changes. Compulsory military training started in 1909. Military organisation was restructured after Field Marshal Viscount Herbert Kitchener visited Australia in 1910. The regular army was organised into Australian Infantry Regiment foot soldiers, field companies, engineers, garrison, artillery batteries, light horse brigades, mounted troops. At the time, Australian law didn't permit men in the regular army and the civilian forces, part-time reserves, to serve in wars overseas. Now, did you notice the name Herbert Kitchener? Well, it turns out there is also a Red Ensign flag of that name. This flag was created the year after the creation of the AIF, 1915. This flag was also known as the Churchill flag. Herbert Kitchener flag history from the Australian War Memorial. It's the little amounts of misinformed information that create their narrative, and to those of you who do not study history, unfortunately, you'll be easy to lead. There are many examples of this within all of the Kingdom of Australia and Australian Royal Council's dogma, including all their little spin-off groups that seem to disappear soon after they are created. Just like the YouTube videos they produced that now seem to have almost been completely wiped away.